Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really powerful narrative that gets right down to the core of human nature. We spend so much time figuring out how to achieve success, but we rarely stop to examine who we actually become once we get there. So let's explore this fascinating contrast between wealth-driven pride and genuine, unshakable character. So, what is the true price of pride? Before we jump fully into our narrative, I want you to consider how we truly measure a person's worth in our crazy, fast-paced modern world. Think about it. When you're walking down a busy street, how quickly do you assess someone's value based entirely on what they're wearing or, what they're driving? We live in a society that often heavily rewards the external stuff, those visible markers of achievement, while completely ignoring the internal. But what actually happens when those visible markers become the only way we measure human dignity? Well, as you'll see today, the price of that kind of pride isn't just a loss of human connection. It's a really dangerous vulnerability that can leave us completely spiritually bankrupt when the storms of life inevitably hit.
Section 1. The Arrogance of Wealth. Let's introduce our protagonist, Arthur. Now, Arthur is a young, highly successful CEO living right in the heart of a bustling, ultra-modern city.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Arthur's rapid ascent came with a hidden cost. His environment really shaped his worldview, establishing very specific metrics for human worth: clothes, cars, and his bank balance. He literally didn't see people anymore. He just saw balance sheets and brand names. If you didn't have the right designer suit, the right luxury vehicle, or a massive bank account, you were pretty much invisible to him. Or worse, you were beneath him. He had completely outsourced his judgment of character to material possessions. And honestly, it's a really easy trap to fall into when everything around you reinforces the idea that your worth is tied directly to your wealth. But as a metric for navigating the human experience, it is incredibly fragile. To put this into perspective, on one side we have Arthur. Picture him arriving at a high-end restaurant in a pristine luxury sports car, the absolute picture of young, arrogant wealth. Now, on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, we meet Samuel. Samuel is an elderly, homeless man. He's wearing a tattered coat, he's shivering in the cold, pouring rain, and he carries literally nothing but a small wooden box. Samuel approaches Arthur and just politely asks for a few coins for a hot cup of tea. It's a classic collision of two completely different worlds, right? The man who seemingly has everything and the man who seemingly has absolutely nothing. Moving on to Section 2, the test in the rain. This is a basic test of humanity because, life has a really funny way of presenting us with profound tests in the most everyday, mundane moments. So Arthur looks down at Samuel's dirty shoes and torn clothes with absolute disgust, and he says coldly, "I don't waste my hard-earned money on lazy people like you." Wow. He doesn't just say no. He uses the moment to actively belittle Samuel. He weaponizes his wealth to assert dominance over a vulnerable person. And this really highlights the intense cruelty of Arthur's pride. He genuinely believes his financial success is entirely a product of his own superior virtue. And therefore, in his mind, Samuel's poverty must be a product of laziness. With that totally cold, callous rejection, Arthur just brushes past Samuel and steps into the warmth and comfort of the luxurious restaurant, completely dismissing Samuel's humanity. But Samuel's reaction? It is absolutely remarkable. He didn't shout, he didn't curse Arthur out, he didn't even try to defend his honor. He simply smiled gently, nodded without a single word of anger, and just walked away into the heavy rain. This silent, gentle reaction starkly contrasts with Arthur's aggressive hostility. And guys, this is our first major clue about true character. Arthur, the powerful CEO, is so easily triggered into cruelty, while Samuel, the homeless man shivering in the cold, possesses incredible emotional restraint and grace. It really begs the question, who is actually the stronger man in this interaction? Which brings us to Section 3, a sudden reversal of fortune. Fast forward just 1 hour later, Arthur finishes his business lunch and steps back outside the restaurant. But the circumstances are about to completely strip him of all his protective layers. Look at this incredibly rapid descent into helplessness. At 1 p.m., Arthur arrives in his untouchable luxury sports car. At 1:05 p.m., he's insulting Samuel, feeling entirely superior, but by 2 p.m., everything changes. He reaches for his pocket and his heart just sinks. His master car key is gone, and even worse, his phone battery is completely dead. Without that key, he literally cannot get into his car, and all the nearby shops are closing for the evening. In the span of just 1 hour, he has gone from a master of the universe to a man stranded, cold, wet, and totally helpless on a sidewalk. That prized, expensive luxury vehicle right in front of him is now entirely useless. His massive bank balance cannot unlock that door. This leads perfectly into Section 4, an unexpected act of grace. Because as Arthur stands there, totally helpless and soaked by the storm, shivering just exactly as Samuel was an hour earlier, an old umbrella suddenly appears right over his head. He turns around to find Samuel. Let's unpack what happens next. First, Samuel offers the umbrella, softly saying, "You look troubled, son." Then he reaches into his little wooden box to provide a clean, warm towel for Arthur to dry off. And finally, the ultimate act. He reaches into his pocket and hands back Arthur's lost car key. Samuel explains that he saw it fall near the entrance when Arthur walked inside. And here is the absolute kicker. Samuel waited out there, in the freezing, pouring rain, for a full hour, just to make sure no one else took Arthur's key. He literally endured the storm to protect the property of the exact man who had verbally abused him. So Arthur just stares at the key in utter disbelief. I mean, imagine the immense, crushing weight of guilt and shame washing over him in this exact second. He had treated this elderly man with absolute cruelty based on nothing but his appearance. Yet this same man had stood in the pouring rain to help him when he was at his most vulnerable. Arthur's entire worldview is just short-circuiting right now. With a trembling voice, Arthur finally manages to ask the only question that matters. Why did you help me after how I spoke to you? And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute core of our explainer today. Samuel answers, a person's character is shown not by how they treat the rich, but by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Hunger hurts the body, son, but disrespect hurts the soul. Wow, this is so profound. Samuel's teaching Arthur that true human dignity isn't tied to a bank account whatsoever. Yes, Samuel was physically hungry and cold, which absolutely hurts the body. But Arthur's insult, his disrespect, was a direct attack on the soul. And yet Samuel possessed the inner strength to not let that attack corrupt his own character. Now for Section 5, the true value of character. Samuel's quiet moment of grace completely shatters the armor of Arthur's arrogance. Driven by habit, Arthur's very first instinct is to pull out his wallet to pay Samuel for finding the key. But then he stops. He realizes money isn't nearly enough to make up for his behavior. You simply cannot buy your way out of a moral failure. So instead, Arthur actually takes off his own warm, expensive jacket and wraps it around Samuel's shivering shoulders. He offers genuine warmth. And then he invites Samuel back inside the restaurant, not as some charity case, but to sit across from him and share a meal together as an absolute equal. Ultimately, the takeaway here is that character is shown not by how you treat the rich or the powerful, but by how you treat those who can seemingly do absolutely nothing for you. Wealth can buy you a lot of comfort, for sure. It can buy you a luxury car, a nice suit, and an expensive lunch. But genuine respect, kindness, and a humble character, those things are entirely priceless. They literally cannot be purchased. They have to be cultivated from within. Samuel had absolutely nothing in his pockets, but he was incredibly rich in character. Arthur had everything in his pockets, but he had to learn the value of character the hard way. So I want to end our explainer today by looking right at you with this final thought. If you lost everything today, your title, your bank account, your nice clothes, your car, what would your character actually be worth? When all the shiny status symbols are stripped away and you are just standing in the rain, who are you? Because at the end of the day, how we treat the most vulnerable among us is the truest reflection of who we really are. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible source material, and until next time, keep learning, keep reflecting, and keep building that character.